Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this last exciting keynote. We really hope you found the past 2 days to be exciting, informative, and that you've met a few new faces and had some fantastic discussions. I know I have. I'm now absolutely delighted to introduce our closing keynote session for RCSLT 2023, which is titled Big Dream, Work Hard, Be Resilient, Embracing the Future Together, which will be presented by Beth Moolen. Beth is an internationally recognized figure in the field of AAC. Beth and her family have been regular contributors to worldwide AAC conferences. In fact, she holds the record as the youngest solo presenter at the International Society for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, ISAC conferences, where in Dusseldorf, at the tender age of just 12, she presented on her experiences as a young person in navigating educational expectations on her as an AAC user. She's pushed boundaries and altered perceptions by delivering Dare to Dream workshops in places like Australia, the US, and Canada. Here, she's been empowering people to aspire beyond their own expectations. Amongst other things, which she may expand on during a presentation, Beth has been a role model for the charity One Voice. She's a trustee of the UK AAC charity Communication Matters. She has been a participant in several AAC research studies and has carried out her own research in social policy as an undergraduate at the University of York. She's currently completing a master's level studies there. She's also been a representative at the United Nations and is passionate about social justice for all. And finally, there's the little matter of Beth being a Paralympian, representing the UK in Japan at Bucha. Moderating this session and supporting Beth is Professor Janice Murray, who is Professor of Communication Disability at Manchester Metropolitan University. Thank you both for being here, and I shall now hand over to you, Beth.
Times in our lives that we remember clearly. In July 2008, when I was 14, I was fortunate enough to be taken by my parents to the International Society of Augmentative and Alternative Communication Conference in Montreal, Canada. The events of that week-long ISAC conference still impact my life today. First, I attended a workshop for AAC users on communication rights. I was blown away to learn that the United Nations Convention of Rights of People with Disabilities had come into force, and that AAC was not only defined in Article 2 of the Convention, but that communication runs as a golden thread throughout the whole convention. To my teenage mind, this had to automatically make a huge difference for all AAC users. Overnight, I had an expectation of us all being empowered to share our views, opinions, and thoughts. I particularly liked that the articles advocated the need for family support and for highly trained staff to support learners of all ages in all settings, especially schools. Secondly, that week I attended a Brilliant Dreams workshop that has provided me with a roadmap for my life ever since. We were taught to take our dreams, set effective goals, to manage our progress, and the tools needed to achieve our desired outcomes. I still use this process in my life. I've been a dreamer for as long as I can remember. I was 4 when I got my first electronic communication aid, 25 years ago. From that first day I wanted other children who had no voice to be heard and understood. This passion has never diminished, although it has changed. I realized as I got older that children become adults. That is an AACU. This was not something that was a temporary fix, but a lifetime commitment. As I've grown up, it has become clear that whilst the right to communicate is enshrined within the CRPD, it doesn't mean it happens. My passion means in 2021 I joined the International Communication Rights Alliance, a group of organizations and individuals working to operationalize the convention. To this end, I've been privileged to address the CRPD Committee twice on communication rights for AAC users. In 2022, I was elected to the Board of Communication Matters, and I was invited to become patron of One Voice, a charity for young AAC users and their families. For many societies around the world, AAC is not something they have heard about. Even in most developed nations, there is no automatic right to AAC resources. In the UK, there is a postcode lottery of provision and eligibility criteria, which means some people don't get funding. We have no specific communication Bill of Rights. Instead, this right is woven into different legislation and policies. With devolution, AAC users in Scotland fare better. Within the rest of the UK, provision is patchy. Yet, with the right support, an AAC user can do more than ask for a drink or choose to wear a yellow jumper. From personal experience, I know AAC is so much more than a box where you press a button and utter a simple request, or answer a basic question. With the right input and ongoing support, AAC becomes a resource to help individuals fulfill their own potential. In my case, to become a successful Paralympian, a postgraduate student, a policy geek, a workshop leader, a public speaker, and a mentor who just happens to use AAC. But none of this is possible without hard work. Drawing on my Paralympic experience, I came across the claim it takes 10,000 hours of training to become a world-class athlete. I'd been playing bocce since I was 10. As I went up the ladder, I was expected to train more and more. Eventually, this became a full-time job. In many ways, excelling in sport is like becoming fluent in another language, or becoming a world-class pianist who practices daily to stay at the top. This is similar to my experience of learning to use AAC. And I say this because my 10,000 hours of practice has been on top of the usual social and language exposure any other child gets. Most people don't give much thought to the fact they can talk. What I can say is that as an adult AAC user, being able to speak is always top of my mind. Is my device fully charged to start the day? How much charge have I got? When I travel or move to a new chair, where is my voice? Does my setup meet my evolving needs? Do I have the language and skills for my next challenge? Getting assessed for and receiving a communication device is not a destination, but the start of a lifelong, often bumpy journey. As I got older, I met other adult AAC users, many with acquired communication impairments, following stroke, with multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's. Some had progressive conditions like my sporting peers, then there have been those with temporary conditions, maybe following illness or surgery. I discovered because they previously had speech, the focus was quickly getting them back to their communication competence, or finding ways to preserve their speech output for the future, such as voice banking. The fundamental tenet of their competence to communicate was based on their assumed ability. I can't imagine anyone asking Stephen Hawking to prove he was cognitively able before giving him AC. In direct contrast to this, most children have a very different journey. First, they must show they have failed to meet expected milestones. And second, there is a need to gain evidence they will be able to use AAC effectively. And then if they are lucky and meet the strict eligibility criteria to receive powered AAC, they may be expected overnight to use it proficiently, whilst learning alongside their peers who have speech. We hear all the time in the world of AAC that we must presume competence. In other words, work on the basis everyone can learn and grow, that there should be no prerequisites for AAC. Getting AAC resources isn't enough. Success for all users only follows when there are high expectations and high support environments. Being recognized as having the potential is crucial to success. Everyone is unique and will have a different journey to their own destination. However, to fulfill our own potential, we need well-trained communication partners within schools and the community who have the time, skills, and experience to support AAC users in all their settings, including at home. Families are the key to success. Children are in school less than 1/3 of their waking lives, which means communication opportunities abound at home and in the community. Would it be too much to consider that the specialist support available during term time in school is made available during holidays at home? In an AAC user's life, skilled communication partners are vital. I'm calling them communication partners rather than conversation partners, because a child or young person is learning to communicate as they learn to use their AAC resources. I'm aware the favorite term is conversation partner because adults have an acquired conversational skill which may have been lost, whereas with children and young people communication is a developing skill that will take sustained hard work over years to achieve. I'd like to focus on some key areas of how I believe we can embrace the future together for AC users. First, early intervention. On Good Friday in 1994, I made my entrance into the world. After a very tricky full-term birth, I was on the audiologist's radar more or less immediately. 4 months later after a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, I welcomed into my life a physiotherapist and an occupational therapist. Together, all three ensured from an early stage I was unwittingly learning to lip read, working hard to sit and walk, and doing things with my hands to encourage functional use. I never had an issue making myself understood with my parents or my childminder. I could always tell people what I wanted to eat and drink, where, or how to play. My parents had normal expectations of me cognitively. They definitely presumed communication and cognitive competence. With a pediatrician, they agreed a mainstream school placement was best. And by the time I was 2.5, I was at the local village play group with a 1-to-1 funded assistant. Imagine then the first visit from the speech and language therapist. I was by then 3 and this was someone we hadn't met before. Whilst Mum knew my speech was unclear, we didn't have a specific diagnosis other than cerebral palsy. In came this lady who said people couldn't understand me. She got out of her bag a board with a picture of orange juice and milk and told Mum that I should use it to make drink choices. There was no presuming competence. The short story is the SLT left with her communication board. Maybe this was supposed to be a shock tactic, and if it was, it worked. By the next visit, Mum had started to research augmentative and alternative communication. She was then ready to embrace discussing electronic resources. The result was that just before I was 4, I had my first AC assessment. At the end of a very long and tiring session, I managed to tell people, using an electronic device, I was hungry and wanted to go home. They were very clever people putting the symbols from McDonald's any home where I could find them again. But getting a device does not make things plain sailing. 25 years ago, few people had computers in work. The only other one in my school was on the secretary's desk. I continued to see my SLT for work on my dysarthric speech, but at that time there appeared to be no manual on how AC should be taught and integrated into the curriculum. Second, I class myself as a multimodal communicator. Like all of you here, I don't rely on just one method of communicating. My dysphotic speech is only understood by those I'm close with, in context. Like everyone else, I use my voice, facial expression, my eyes, body language and gesture interchangeably. It was through meeting other AAC users I became confident to tell people the best ways to communicate with me. Simple things like be on my level so I can see your face and you can see mine. When I got to special school at 13, then I was introduced to using my eyes to say yes and no. Actually a lifesaver when you are exhausted or ill. Then being introduced to a communication passport, a vital tool in my communication armory that would have been so useful earlier in life. These simple examples show the importance of ongoing support. I'd like to think my own experiences don't exist today. However, anecdotal evidence suggests ongoing support for AAC users can still be patchy and irregular. Our journey as AAC users is not just about acquiring language and literacy. It has to be about being prepared for the challenges of life and knowing how to help others to help us. In primary school, we learned to embrace the multidisciplinary team around me. My learning in school was sometimes through trial and error. It was the teacher for the hearing impaired who gave great guidance that was really relevant to using AAC, for instance how to structure and facilitate written work and learning spellings. At other times my mum tried out and then discussed with my teachers strategies she was learning on her Open University psychology degree and from her own AAC research. I found learning from the AAC community invaluable. AAC user events are few and far between. Growing up, once a year we traveled to the One Voice national event. From the age of 15 I attended Communication Matters, the main conference for AAC professionals, users, and families. Then every 2 years my parents took me to the Isaac International Conference. This means I've had the good fortune to have AAC role models since I was 7. Knowing you are not alone as an AAC user is so important. Seeing the journey others have made helps not just an AAC user, but their support network to also have high expectations of what might be possible. For me, it was aspirational to know I could be independent in the future, have my own home, go to university, and have a family. What these opportunities also made me realize were that the future can hold scary events, and those are things many people struggle with, not just AAC users. There is plenty of research around the vulnerabilities of those with communication impairments, especially the greater risk of social isolation than for others. Puberty is a difficult time for many young people, learning to manage emotions and impulses, until eventually becoming rational and effective decision makers. Despite being a good AAC user, I had issues at age 15 communicating my feelings and emotions with the people who mattered to me. When your head is in overdrive, finding the right strategies to communicate can be challenging. It became so bad I ended up over 8 weeks more in hospital than at home. I was totally freaked out by being unable to communicate my innermost thoughts, so things just kept getting worse. The cause was a bereavement, and the sudden realization that my parents wouldn't be there forever. Then wondering how I would live in the future, and who would help coordinate my support. Once we understood the cause, I worked my way through this with Mum's help. We used reflexive strategies to write poetry, make mood boards, create lists, identify from photographs safe places and people, and more. When I returned to school, I had the evidence to self-advocate with school staff so they understood both the issues and how their actions had unwittingly played a part of my mental health issues. But what happens when someone is in a dark place but has no access to the right support, tools, and vocabulary to express themselves? Life doesn't stop when we leave education at 18, and nor should learning. Again, my own experience is if you go on to higher education or support from an education, health and social care plan ceases. Life transitions can be challenging at the best of times for people who have no disability. For those of us who use AAC, it seems we are often unwittingly set up to fail. There is no communication partner training available for academic assistants in higher education. If you get staff from a specialist agency, they are trained to support note-taking, work with people with autism, dyslexia, or sensory impairments. Ironically, when you have a communication disability, it's up to the individual student, like me, to train their staff in what's required. Coming direct from school to university was another culture shock. The familiarity of family and established and well-trained school staff was gone. Living independently means needing to communicate with new staff both during your waking day and if you wake at night. I'm grateful to 3 people. First, unsurprisingly, my mum in providing me with the support to learn how to standardize my training for academic work, recruit and lead a team, deal with difficult situations including safeguarding issues, and train my own team to become communication partners. Second, the counselor who has been with me for 10 years. She's helped me with some tricky situations and to build resilience. And third, my SLT who now sits in the background but gets called in to do training for new team members. Two key learnings that were brought home through tough times were as an AACU, you need to learn to take responsibility for your own communication. The bottom line is that I don't want other people to speak for me. I deserve my voice to be heard. The second is for people to realize that no one is often ready at times of transition or different life stages. I recently talked with a lifelong friend. We had a good laugh about how at 29, doing a PhD, he still hasn't had to lead a team, recruit a staff member, or give a verbal warning for poor performance. All skills I was expected to learn overnight at age 19. I recently led a workshop at the Communication Matters Conference with another AAC user. Our focus was to find out what other training and support adult AAC users feel they need for their futures. There isn't time to go into this in full, but the participants' key priorities were threefold. Underpinning the findings was the ongoing need to develop communication skills. First, skills around updating vocabulary, developing more knowledge of their own resources and concerns around future assessments. Second, leading their own support teams in order to live independently requires new and evolving communication skills to the ones they'd had in education. And finally, AAC users want to be engaged in the world of work, and this requires yet again different communication skills. Unfortunately, what we know is that before leaving education, speech and language input often stops, and in many cases as soon as an intervention is in place. There are so many ways in which ongoing professional input could support us to live independently, develop leadership skills, move into the world of work, and develop social communication skills. In principle, we can argue all the points I've raised are covered by national legislation and guidance. I was privileged to contribute to the new Royal College AAC guidance. More recently, I was able to review the NICE transition guidance for moving to adult services. One thing I really welcomed was their equality impact assessment statement is recommending every young person with an education, health and care plan has a communication summary sheet to ensure they don't fall off the cliff edge when they transition into adult services. This alone will give a lot of AAC users greater confidence that their future needs will at least get reviewed as adults. We hear a lot about early intervention, but just as important for AAC users is ongoing support. When you are lucky enough to work with an AAC user, I hope you will view this as a long-term relationship, one that may over time wax and wane. At times of transition, taking more input, and during other periods of life, carrying a watching brief. It was clear the adult AAC users I worked with that communication matters all had aspirations and dreams. They wanted to embrace their futures. But dreams alone, even with action, does not always bring success. The hard work of communicating with AAC never diminishes, but with ongoing support, practice and resilience comes the ability to fulfill our own potential. And remember, our success can be yours too. Together we can embrace the future.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you very much for a very inspiring closing to this wonderful conference. I've got the privilege of asking you some questions, and we can just keep talking until Sean comes back in and interrupts us to really round off the conference in the way that he can and he must. So let me come first to a question for you. Could you say a little about what a communication passport is?
A. Communication. Password. Passport is basically a sheet or a book that explains to communication, partner, partners, how to interact with you and you can go into details like your likes and dislikes and your top tips. A communication passport is basically a sheet or a book that explains to communication partners how to interact with you, and you can go into details like your likes and dislikes and your top tips.
Thank you. Yes, so I guess it acts as a passport to aid that communication with people who know you less well. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let me move on to the next question, which starts with a comment. It says, "Hi Beth, I have loved listening to you. I really worry about all the adults and children with cerebral palsy and potentially assumed to have profound learning disability. What can we do to change this? Is assuming competence enough? Is there anything you would suggest?"
I think just assume. Competent. Competency and work from there. I think just assume competency and work from there.
Keeping an open mind about an individual. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We've got a few here, so I want to move on through. I'm making you work quite quickly here. So the next comment is, "I feel the transition from paediatric services for AAC and adult services for AAC can still be a challenge. Do you have any thoughts for the journey through speech and language therapy services? Is there anything missing that you would like to see?"
Lots. But I think the key is preparing for transition. I don't know how this would work, but maybe 2 years before having a gradual process involving the adult service and let them to get to know us before you disappear. Lots, but I think the key is preparing for transition. I don't know how this would work, but maybe 2 years before, having a gradual process involving the adult service and let them get to know us before you disappear.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful in terms of that joined upness across services. Yeah. Now I'm going to jump to one question ahead of a question that I think we might want to finish with. So here's the question I'm going to ask you next. Amazing talk, Beth. Thank you. What advice would you give to the parent of a young child who's considering AAC?
Go for it. AAC will be useful. No matter what get in there and start go for it. AAC will be useful no matter what. Get in there and start early.
I think we want to capture that quote, Beth. Thank you for that one. I think that would inspire anybody who's anxious about what it might prevent, as in the usual anxiety about it preventing speech developing. So thank you for that. So I've got another question, and I think we all want to know the answer to this. The person says maybe a bit of a random question for Beth. You've achieved lots in your life. What's your next goal?
Let me finish my master's first, but I would love to do a PhD one day, but one thing at a time. Please let me finish my master's first, but I would love to do a PhD one day, but one thing at a time, please.
Well, I think if you did one thing at a time, Beth, it would be the first time ever. And all I want to finish up by saying before I hand back to Sean is you can't see them at the minute, but there are lots of lovely comments on the conversational platform for you. So we will make sure that you see them later. But just before I hand back to Sean, I would like to say on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for giving us lots of food for thought. Many congratulations for what you've achieved so far, and we look forward to hearing the next instalment. Thank you, Beth. Back to Sean.
Wow. I mean, just, I don't think there are words available, really. I think, you know, words like inspirational just aren't enough, really. I love that your personality, your wit and charm come across. And I'm quite jealous of your slides. They're amazing. So wonderful answers. And I'm sure we'll capture those for us to refer to later. And congratulations on all that you've achieved, just to echo what Janice said. And I'm sure you'll be back as doctor, and dare I say, other things later, and we'll be delighted to see your progress through life, and I'm sure you'll be welcome back at conference in the future. So thank you so much, Beth, and thank you, Janice, for being a wonderful host and asking those questions. What a delight to end our conference. So just a few final things to finish off with. I just wanted to say how inspired and how enjoyable the conference has been. It's absolutely flown by for me. I'm sure I'll be looking at those recordings that will be available after the conference is finished to catch on the things that I couldn't make or that clashed with something else. I'm just very aware that we are now in a post-COVID-19 world. There are new challenges, including a lot more technology, telehealth, AI, lots of challenges, and I'm old enough to think it was ever thus, that there's always new challenges around the corner. But as ever, I'm struck by how positive and full of energy and problem solving for our service users our profession is. And it's been wonderful to see the fantastic research, clinical practice, service improvement that's been disseminated at the conference this year. We're an amazing profession, and I'm really proud to be part of it and to be your chair at this time. I'm sure we'll rise to all those challenges. Just left to me to really do some thank yous and some nice prizes. So thank you to the conference organising committee and all the dedicated RCSLT staff who worked so hard to make the conference a success. A big shout out to our new CEO. Steve has really had his first conference and made an impression. I'm sure anyone who's listened to his presentations and to the drop-in will know that he's a really good leader for our RCSLT. And thanks, of course, to all our presenters and poster authors. Your research, clinical findings and knowledge are the absolute lifeblood of our profession, and just so fascinating to discuss things that are progressing within our profession. We have had, just a reminder, 8 amazing keynote sessions, 24 knock your socks off parallel sessions with 71 presentations, and over 60 posters. Absolutely fantastic at one of our largest conferences ever, with over 1,400 attendees. How amazing. And now for some prizes just before we go. The top 3 people on the competition leaderboard were first place Jodie Simpson, second place Sam Burr, and third place Kate Harvey. So the events team will contact you directly to get your prize to you. The most attended and highly rated session was Professional Experience and Diversity. And the most liked poster was Collaborative Working between Speech and Language Therapists and Teaching Staff in Mainstream Schools, a scoping review by Helen Spicer-Kane and Alice Mathers. So as I said, edited recordings should be available on the platform next week. The posters will be remaining available on the network, and the events team should upload presentations subject to consent by the authors for you to pursue those references that you probably didn't have time to write down during the presentations. A big thank you to all of you who have joined us virtually. I thank you so much for participating in this conference. It's been a real joy. I hope the rest of your week goes really well, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.